challenge the legitimacy of the marijuana laws in this province. He is the most prominent political challenger to those laws which are in defiance of the wishes of the majority of the Canadian people. Certainly in defiance of the wishes of the people of BC, and which have no other purpose than to protect the profits of alcohol producers and distributors and the pharmaceutical drug industry.
Hear, hear.
Laws that we must endure at the command of our American masters in order to keep car parts moving from Windsor to Detroit. That's the price of our sovereignty. People in Ontario, their interests, we've got to keep those car parts moving, so we've got to crack down on those pot people in British Columbia because America wants us to. Complete bullshit, my friends. Mark Emery has been a constant thorn in the side of those liars, hypocrites, and cowards that continue to inflict an American drug war on the world and on us. He perhaps sealed his fate several years ago when he paid for an entire table to attend the Vancouver Board of Trade conference, at which the guest speaker was a man named John Walters, the then head of the Drug Enforcement Administration in the United States.
That's right.
Emery and his associates interrupted Walters a number of times with shouts of bullshit and liar.
Yes, sir.
All of which is entirely appropriate in our conversation, given that John Walters is undeniably a bullshitter and a liar.
It was the truth.
Just over a year ago, the DEA retaliated in a blatant use of police power for the political purpose of silencing Mark Emery. They filed an extradition request claiming that he had violated American law by selling marijuana seeds, even though neither he nor the two other people charged with him ever left British Columbia soil. The fact that all of his alleged American offenses actually occurred in Canada resulted in the charges I filed against Mark and Greg and Michelle here in Nelson.
I see.
That was last August. Those charges were filed because I believe the three people I charged are guilty, and because I believe it is absolutely imperative to proceed with these charges here in Canada to demonstrate that we are a sovereign country that bows to no foreign master.
Yes, sir.
Coincidentally, but not purposefully, those charges also preclude any extradition to the United States for the same allegations of conduct.
Thank you.
What happens? The Attorney General of BC, the chief law officer of this province, declines to intervene, meaning the prosecution has his blessing, and he's the man who should decide. However, the federal Attorney General, through his chief minion in Vancouver, tries to horn in and stop the Nelson charges. This despite the fact that there is no statutory authority in the criminal code allowing such interference, and despite the fact that the constitutional agreements of this country do not provide for any involvement at all by the federal government in the administration of justice in this province. Don Skogstead, one of the great voices for justice in this community, has joined me in challenging this interference, and we are now in a long legal battle to see that the BC3, as our Vancouver friends are now known, will be judged solely by Canadians for conduct that occurred solely in Canada. Which brings me to the issue of the day, the attack on Paul DeFelice by the Nelson City Police, acting at the behest of God only knows who. To date, we don't know the details, but we do know this. Paul was set upon by a gang of police thugs, acting like they were in some cheap American movie, manacled at the wrists, imprisoned, and charged with some trivial marijuana offenses. Although he is convicted of nothing, he is forbidden, for some reason, from going to his own store. His arrest here in this most marijuana progressive city in North America represents dark clouds on the horizon of our freedom. We are at early days in terms of understanding what is going on, but one thing is clear. There is going to be a concerted effort by men and women hiding in the shadows of this community to misrepresent who we are and how tolerant we are, and to replace all of that with their own sick, authoritarian, almost dead view of life and how it should be lived. That effort will be characterized by lies, hypocrisy, and cowardice. Bet on it. But Paul does face an ordeal that is being forced on marijuana activists in this province and elsewhere in Canada. Speaking as a survivor, I have to say this about that ordeal. One of the greatest soccer teams in modern history has been Liverpool Football Club. It has a long and deeply held tradition of honoring those men who have brought glory to the team and the city on the football pitch. That tradition is represented by their extraordinarily moving anthem, "You'll Never Walk Alone." Absent the death of relatives and good friends, the darkest day of my life came in the second day of my imprisonment in Haarlem. I had been separated from Katie, the beautiful woman I love, in bewildering circumstances, and was learning that the presumption of innocence did not exist in a country whose own freedom was purchased by the blood of Canadian soldiers and their sacrifice, one of whom was my own father. I recall laying on my bed in darkness and hearing a key turning in the lock. A woman guard opened the door and said in accented English, "Mr. Roberts, a man named Bob Keating from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in Nelson has called for you. Here is his number. He says to call collect." I cannot express to you the emotion of hearing those words. I was not alone. From over 4,000 miles away, one person was reaching out to tell the story of what was happening to me. I called Bob, who was a superb reporter, and he listened to my story. "They're trying to shut you up," he said. He then told me the story would be all over the world the next day. And it was. The next day, a guard came to the door and told me that the story was all over the news in Holland. Soon after, I spoke with Katie and was told that Darren Davidson, another superb reporter, wanted to do a story on me in the Nelson Times, Daily News, front page coverage. People were finding out, asking questions. I was not alone. Paul, my friend, you have given years of your life in a beautiful and honest effort to make Nelson a better and more tolerant place. You have been very successful in that effort, and you now face this ordeal as a result. Know one thing with certainty. As you go through that ordeal, you will never walk alone. I want to close my remarks by addressing the issue of what is to be done. I want to begin that by giving you a bit of the old poetry, as we say in Ireland. And you look like a crowd that would like some poetry. It is a poem called "The Rebel." And its author was an Irish schoolmaster and poet that my mother, an Irish peasant woman, named me after. His name was Pádraig Pearse, and he was the author of another document, the Proclamation of the Irish Republic, for which he was executed by an English firing squad one May morning in 1916. Brian, who just spoke to you, and I are both proud citizens of that republic for which he and many others shed their life's blood. It is, to my mind, the finest writing of defiance of illegitimate authority in the English language, and I'd like to read it to you now. It's about 3 verses.